The National Cancer Institute finished its Iodine 131 study in 1992. They sat on it for 5 years. When it finally came out in 1997, it showed that fallout from Nevada test site atmospheric tests had reached all 48 contiguous states. Estimated excess thyroid cancers between 11,000 and 212,000. The range is that wide because the exposure data the AEC collected was incomplete. The monitoring system designed to protect people had also, very conveniently, made it impossible to calculate the full damage. That is where this story ends. Here is where it starts. January 27, 1951. A 1-kiloton bomb drops from a plane over a flat stretch of Nevada desert, 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The AEC calls the place virtually uninhabited. They detonate 928 times over the next 41 years. 100 of those shots happen above ground, in open air, before the 1963 Partial Test Ban Treaty shuts down atmospheric testing. After that, the tests go underground. The workers stay on the surface. The Nevada test site covers 1,360 square miles. To run it, the AEC needed contractors, not physicists, not soldiers, civilian workers, graders, drivers, construction crews, security guards. Most of them come through Reynolds Electrical and Engineering Company, RECO, the primary site contractor from 1952 through 1995. These are men who go to work in the desert the same way other men go to work in a mine or on a road crew. They wear film badges clipped to their shirts. They're told the badges will catch anything dangerous. Nobody tells them what the badges actually can't do. Film badges measure external gamma radiation. They do not measure what you inhale. They cannot measure radioactive particulate, the dust. And for the graders and the drivers and the construction crews, dust is the job. You grade the ground after a shot. You drill into contaminated soil for post-test sampling. You breathe the air on a site where 100 nuclear weapons have been detonated above ground. The primary exposure pathway for these men is the one their monitoring equipment was structurally incapable of detecting. The 1980 House Subcommittee report on this program documented something else. Badges were frequently not worn. They were lost. When they were recorded, they were often logged at the minimum detectable dose, regardless of what they actually showed. The monitoring system wasn't just technically inadequate, it was operationally unreliable. And the AEC knew it. Now move 150 miles northeast, St. George, Utah. Population roughly 5,000 in the early 1950s. A Mormon farming town in the desert, downwind of the test site. May 1953. Operation Upshot Knothole shot Simon. A 43-kiloton tower detonation. The fallout cloud moves northeast. AEC monitoring teams drive through St. George with instruments in their vehicles. They record the readings. They do not stop. They do not knock on doors. They do not warn anyone. The AEC's off-site monitoring program runs under a classified arrangement with the Public Health Service. The data cannot be shared with state health departments. It cannot be shared with residents. The people of St. George hang their laundry out to dry. Their children play in the street. They drink from cisterns fed by rainwater that has passed through the cloud. AEC Commissioner Thomas Murray writes an internal memo that same year acknowledging that fallout is reaching populated areas at levels that would require public disclosure if the data were released. The memo is classified. The public statement from the AEC is consistent throughout this period. The tests pose no danger to nearby communities. Exposures are within safe limits. The program is a national security necessity. By the 1960s, doctors in southern Utah are starting to notice something: leukemia cases, thyroid cancers, a pattern that doesn't fit the baseline. Irma Thomas of St. George notices it too. Her husband Elmer is diagnosed with leukemia. He dies. Irma Thomas is not an activist. She is a housewife in a small Utah town who wants to know why her husband is dead and whether anyone in Washington knew it was coming. She is not alone. The cancer clusters in Utah, downwinder counties, keep growing through the 1970s. In 1979, University of Utah epidemiologist Joseph Lyon, publishes a study in the New England Journal of Medicine. He looks at childhood leukemia mortality in Utah fallout counties. During the peak fallout years, 1959 to 1967, leukemia deaths in children aged 0 to 14 ran 2.44 times higher than in the pre-test baseline period of 1944 to 1950. It is the first peer-reviewed study to directly link NTS fallout to civilian cancer mortality. The institutional response: dispute the methodology. Question the sample size. Fund counter-studies. The AEC is gone by 1977, replaced by the Department of Energy, but the posture doesn't change. Then, in August 1980, the House Committee on Interstate and Foreign Commerce publishes its subcommittee report. The title is The Forgotten Guinea Pigs. One line from that report has never been walked back, not once, in the 44 years since it was published. The government has lied to the people of Utah and Nevada about the dangers of fallout. That is not a journalist, not a campaigner. That is a congressional committee in a published government document. Irma Thomas becomes a named plaintiff in Allen versus United States, 1,192 plaintiffs total. In May 1984, federal judge Bruce Jenkins issues his ruling. He finds the government negligent in 10 of 24 bellwether cases. The AEC had failed to warn residents of fallout hazards it knew existed. First time a federal court holds the U.S. government liable for nuclear test fallout deaths. 3 years later, the Ninth Circuit overturns it. Not on the facts, on sovereign immunity. The Federal Tort Claims Act's discretionary function exception shields government policy decisions from liability. Jenkins' factual findings of negligence are not disputed. The government is simply immune from the consequences of them. In 1990, President Bush signs the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, RECA, the first statutory federal admission that these people were harmed. Downwinders in designated counties of Utah, Nevada, and Arizona receive $50,000. For comparison, the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 paid Japanese-American internment survivors $20,000. The people whose government gave them cancer get $50,000. And the eligibility rules are drawn so tightly that most of the people actually affected don't qualify. Post-1971, NTS workers, excluded. Downwinders in states beyond the original 3, excluded. Workers in job categories not specifically listed, excluded. This is where the dosimetry problem becomes a compensation problem. In 2004, NIOSH publishes its site profile for the Nevada test site. It is the federal government's own technical document, the basis for reconstructing worker doses under the compensation program. It acknowledges, plainly, that for many NTS worker categories, particularly those exposed to radioactive dust and venting gases, historical dose reconstruction is impossible. The records were never kept, or they were destroyed. The workers who inhaled the most, the graders, the drivers, the men who moved contaminated earth with their hands, are the workers whose exposures can never be calculated. The compensation system requires documented dose evidence. The dose evidence doesn't exist. The monitoring system that failed to protect them also ensured they could never prove what it did to them. In 2024, Senator Ben Ray Lujan, himself diagnosed with a brain tumor, pushes a RECA expansion bill through the Senate, 69 to 30. It would cover post-1971 NTS workers, downwinders in 12 additional states including New Mexico and Colorado, and extend the program's sunset. The House does not act. RECA expires in June 2024. The Department of Justice stops accepting new claims. An estimated 50,000 or more people with documented cancers and documented exposure histories have no active federal remedy. The NIOSH document from 2004 is still there, the federal government's own technical record. It says that for the workers most exposed to the dust, the men who built and maintained the site, who breathed the air after every shot, the dose records either don't exist or were destroyed. The monitoring system that was supposed to protect them also made certain that the full cost of what was done to them could never be calculated. That is not a failure of record keeping. The 1980 congressional report called it what it was.